Hello, this is Jean Marie Ward for BuzzyMultimedia.com. With me today is best-selling science fiction and fantasy author Catherine Acero. Welcome, Catherine.
Hi.
I understand that in just a few weeks, less than a month, you're going to be the guest of honor at WindyCon.
That's right.
And in honor of the occasion, they have put out an anthology called Aurora, as in the Goddess of the Dawn, in 4 voices, which features a lot of your shorter pieces and, in fact, a discussion of physics.
Well, actually, what we did for that anthology is it's got a collection of several of my novellas, including The City of Cries, which is one of the best things I've ever written, and The Space-Time Pool, which I won the Nebula for. And also Aurora in 4 Voices, which is the title story of the anthology. The stories in that anthology were picked with a particular theme in mind, which was the mathematics that I use in my writing. Several of the stories in there depend on specific sort of mathematical tricks that I was playing with, including one that was, eventually I published a paper in the American Journal of Physics about. It's a mathematical trick for getting around the problems at the speed of light. You know, it doesn't work physically because it requires you make your speed an imaginary number, which they don't exist. But mathematically it works just fine. And there was another story, The Space-Time Pool, was one I wrote about a lot of things happen, but there's a lot of math that the story is based on, including can you model the Moorish arches in architecture from the Moorish, the mosques, the palaces, like the Alhambra, these beautiful buildings that were built by the Moors. If you look at the repeating arches, gorgeous, gorgeous arches, you can model those as sinusoidal functions, with sums of sinusoidal functions. And if you take a Fourier transform of them, all sorts of interesting things happen. So I got intrigued by that when I was describing the palace and the story of the space-time. So I talked about that, and I showed pictures in the essay of the arches for one of the cathedral, which used to be a mosque in Spain. I showed what if you actually take a sum of sinusoidal functions, how they look like the arches, and then I took the Fourier transform and showed that. And I also talked about some of the math behind some of the other stories.
Yeah, but you've not only used the math to describe the visuals, you've used math and physics as the basis of some of your stories.
Yeah, of course.
How does that work?
Well, you know, it's funny. I never really thought that I was doing it because, you know, I've been a scientist my entire adult life. I got interested in physics and chemistry when I was in really my last couple years in high school, but I didn't really get into it until college. And I've done it ever since then. So to me, it's just natural to include that in my writing. I don't even think of it. But when I was trying to get published, and I sent, David Hartwell had looked at some of my work. And at one point I asked him, well, you know, what are you interested in particularly now? He said, well, the hard science fiction that you write is really what I would like to see more of that. And I was very naive at the time. I was just getting into the field. And I said, what is hard science fiction? So he said, you know, science-based. You put a lot of science in your fiction. I said, I do? And he said, yes, you do. So for some of my novels, like Primary Inversion, of which you can get a free version of it in the free library on Baen Books. It's a rewritten version that I specifically gave to the library. That one has a lot of the physical basis. In fact, the physics comes from that paper I wrote for the American Journal of Physics, which describes how you could go faster than the speed of light. And I used all those, you know, cute little tricks and mathematics in the story, and went into a lot of detail, maybe even more detail than some readers want. I mean, in a few places I had numbers. And another one of my books, Spherical Harmonic, does that too. In fact, spherical harmonics is this beautiful angular momentum mathematical function. And I had pictures of them in the book and pictures of Klein bottles. So, you know, I got a little carried away.
Which came first for you, the science fiction or the physics?
Oh, definitely the science fiction. I didn't grow up being thinking I would become a scientist. I was a dancer when I was little. I got interested when I was 3 or 4 years old in ballet. And I started taking classes as soon as they would let me take formal ballet classes. I think I was about 5 or 6. And I did it for most of my life until in college, you know, once I decided to try math and science, the dancing had to go by the wayside for a while. You know, you can only do so much, and I had to catch up on all these years of science and math classes. I got back to it some in college. I directed the Mainly Jazz Dance Company in Harvard University Ballet when I was a graduate. I was running a whole program for a while. We had dance classes, and I was, you know, artistic director of the shows, and I was also a graduate writing my doctorate in physics. So I finally had to stop dancing and finish my doctorate.
But you picked it up again.
Oh yeah, I've always picked it up.
And aren't you going to be appearing in Showboat?
Yes, the run goes from October 21st through November 19th. It's Saturday, Sunday evening performances. Friday, Saturday evening performances.
With WindyCon in the middle of it.
Yes, I have 3 days off from Showboat, so I can go be guest of honor at WindyCon.
But you're also singing in Showboat.
Yeah, I'm singing some songs, and I have the dance lead in that.
But you've been singing more. I'm trying to get to give a plug for your new novel, Carnelian, which, like Diamond Star, is as dependent upon music as...
It's true, yeah.
And, I mean, Diamond Star, didn't it start as a cycle of songs instead of the novel? Or am I getting that wrong?
Well, a little bit. I knew the story was, I always had in my mind the story of this rock star. He's kind of the red sheep of the royal family. He just wants to be a rock star. He doesn't want to sit on a throne. So it was his story, and I wrote the music, and I wrote a lot of lyrics for the book. And I worked with a rock band called Point Ballad to cut a soundtrack basically for the book. The main song, the big finale of the whole book, which there's a lot of interstellar politics going on. And it all comes to a finale in the concert of the main character, where he sings this very powerful, angry song called Carnelian's Finale. Essentially a song that could start an interstellar war. And so the next book, Carnelian, which came out last week.
Yay!
It's not really, a lot more is going on in that book than about the rock star character. He actually only comes in a few scenes in the book. But it's about the fallout from that song, which comes at a really tricky time in relations between the two warring powers of this civilization. And that song could blow apart their attempts to find a peace treaty.
The unintended consequences and other things that the characters do.
Yeah, though it depends, you know. The character himself might not have intended to destroy the peace processes, but he provided their enemies with this tool, this very powerful thing to use against them.